So welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and this time Troy McLachlan is back, and we are going to talk about the Ganymede hypothesis. And an interesting article that was published in The Guardian based on a study that was published in Nature. And they found that Antarctica was teeming with life at one point. So these are our main topics today. And so welcome back, Troy.
Well, it's great to be back.
So before we do that, there are some news items that are especially in the financial world. So what we are seeing is a huge shift away from the petrodollar. Just a couple of days ago, Kenya ditched the dollar, just adding to all the other countries for if they trade oil with Saudi Arabia, they can now pay in Kenyan shillings. And so also like Australia, Iran, China, Argentina, even the EU has a system that allows for different payments than US dollar. And do you think we will see the end of Pax Americana?
Oh, most definitely. I just have a Pax Americana is just another way of saying a hidden kingdom of merchants that have, a sort of a supranational conglomerate of merchants. A lot of people refer to it as the Anglo-American banking sort of cabal system. Very much also involved with Europe for the years since the Second World War with the Bretton Woods agreement and so on, going up to the launch of the petrodollar in '79 with the end of the gold standard, the gold window in the United States. Yes, that, as for those who know my sort of background writing a book called Saturn Death Cult, I argue that this central banking model is quite simply the one thing we all have to get rid of and replace for the world to basically return to any form of sanity, whether that's monetary or even, social sanity that we see in the world today. So I always view it as that. It's a central banking model that used Venice and Florence in the Renaissance period, moved to Amsterdam, moved to London with the advent of the Bank of England, and is now centered around the American system as we have it today. So Pax Americana, as run by that particular system, if anything, it's hopefully the liberation of the United States as a nation from the system that captured it in 1913. That's how I see it. That system is going down, and it's going down in a way that they have not been able to prep the world for a reset, as they'd like to call it, where they have not been able to put us into some kind of worldwide conflagration, a world war, a pandemic. They always do this from the days of Venice, even going back to, I argue, Babylon in ancient times, down through Greece and Rome and so on. They always try to set it up so that you have this, worldwide conflagration. Everybody suffers. They come in with a solution, which is just simply a resetting of their system that always implodes at least every 120, usually 70 years. And that's how they need to do it. I am very optimistic that they have failed totally, and it's something new being led by, dare I say it, the Chinese, the Russians, but also by people who just, even in the West, certainly third world countries that have been, how can I say, hobbled in their development by this system. I think we're all starting to see a move where we have options to move away and we don't need them, and it will collapse under its own weight. Good riddance is what I say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is not that long ago. We all remember when Iraq was talking about ditching the dollar and trading its oil for euros.
Yeah.
And then Libya, and on top of it, Gaddafi suggested to install a gold-backed dinar for all of Africa. Yeah, we know how that ended for those countries.
And
But
they tried to take Assad and Syria out, and I think that's where it started to founder, because the Russians got involved, and he's still there. And I think that was a major blow to their timetable. But yeah, most definitely, they have always, we know that the American military has always been their attack dog to take these people out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but these days it appears to me nobody is afraid of that anymore. The list of countries that are ditching the dollar openly and without any consideration what might happen to them, they are getting more and more.
Yeah. There will be an attempt to trigger something with North Korea, I believe. There have obviously been attempts to widen the conflict in Ukraine. But I have been of the opinion that Taiwan and Ukraine were the two countries most associated with the money laundering that went on within, what I would call the Anglo-American banking establishment, and its connections with what some authors refer to as the Nazi International, or the Fourth Reich Underground, and so on, the Martin Bormann organization that was born in the ashes of the Second World War. Not only are these groups breaking down into factional fighting amongst themselves, but I strongly believe that the attack on Ukraine by Russia was a way of circumventing one of their major money laundering mechanisms, and that we'll see China start working on Taiwan in the very near future. I think sometime this year that we'll see at least some sort of situation involved with Taiwan. And the fact that Biden has not ordered American troops into Ukraine at this stage is only evidence to a lot of other nations that America is now the paper tiger that it has been, I think, at least the last 30 years. But certainly, how can I put it this way? The enemies that they fought before were not the kind of enemies that you would be coming up against if you went up against Russia. It's as simple as that. And I think they've balked at trying to impose their usual systems and so on. We can talk about where I think they thought we would be as a civilization when this happened, and how they plan to basically destroy the West and through a war, and then remold it into a different system, almost as if it was flipped from what happened in Russia and China prior to the Second World War with their in Eastern Europe coming under the communists. It's almost as if the nature of the two hemispheres is flipped. We're now degenerating into that kind of a police state, certainly a surveillance state that East Germany, Russia, and China were infamous for. So yeah, I see people just no longer afraid of the American response. There has always been to, basically attack and invade a country under whatever euphemism they can come up with, terrorism, whatever like that. And I think it's a good thing, but it's we're in very, very shaky territory at the moment as to how this could actually play out. I would like to be optimistic on things. I'd love to, wherever I can, to give people optimism in how it's going to pan out. But I do believe that the world of Western central banking finance is coming to its end. I give it maybe 2 more years of having a relevance, and then after that, I think we'll see an entirely new world.
Yeah, I also believe that there will be a lot of systems collapsing, and but my gut feeling is that the financial system will be one of the first that is going down.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it will be next week or in 2 weeks. As you said, it might very well take another 1 or 2 years. But in the long run, I also see the school system, the medical system, all that collapsing.
Yeah.
Education system, yeah, and I said that the school system,
Mm-hmm.
and so big changes are ahead.
Well, I'd like people to remember a famous quote, Ernest Hemingway, the American author, when asked how he went bankrupt, he said, very slowly at first, and then all of a sudden. And that's the nature of these kinds of crises. It's almost like we're given certain warnings, and I do subscribe to the theory that the people who wanted to crash the system for their benefit, because that's, in my opinion, how they have always done it. They've always crashed it in such a way as that they can then present themselves as a solution on the other side. And we all know that the Great Depression of the 1930s, that some of the greatest fortunes were made at that time because of insider trading, the ability to position themselves with insider knowledge in a system that is completely rigged against the common person. It is the absolute epitome of a two-tier, multi-tier justice system because, as I argue, my own book that I talk, that I keep banging on about, you can't have a genuine civilization that lasts if you don't have equal weights and measures that everybody can trust. And financial systems built on debt, the issuance of currency and money as a debt to society is the absolute definition of an unequal weight or measure that will ultimately result in a few people getting more than the vast majority of everybody, an imbalance along those lines. And, the perpetuation of injustice after injustice, it starts off small and then you reach the stage where we're at the moment. But I think they've botched it. And I think for many of us, it's going to be extremely tense to watch. But if we can watch it with the idea that these people are actually going down, it might help get through some of the darker times that we're all going to face.
Yeah, exactly. And if people have some money that they would like to preserve, I would suggest to transfer a chunk of it into precious metals. Other people like to preserve wealth by going into cryptocurrencies. I don't know enough about that, so I cannot give any advice there. But one thing is for sure, precious metals will never go to zero. Never.
It's been money for 6,000 years.
Yeah.
And that there's a way to look at it. An ounce of gold will always buy you a top-rated suit, item of clothing. In ancient Rome, it would have given you the absolute best in togas, and things like that. So it always retains its wealth there. If I was to add anything to that, I would strongly advise people to consider silver, not sterling, not silver sterling, but silver bullion, simply because silver, I think, I'm not sure, but I think silver is at is it a 300 to 1? It's somewhere along those lines, all right, where 300 ounces, you can do a quick calculation, divide by 23, the current price of silver, and you get that. But the historical norm has always been 15 to 1 and such. So the upside of silver is so huge in in whatever comes after this breakup. And this is what, when people say, why would you use gold and so on like that? Because While you can't go down to a supermarket and buy a can of Coke for, with a slither of gold or whatever it is like that, it allows you to buy back into whatever replaces in terms of a currency system. You can buy back at the same purchasing power you had when you bought your gold, in terms of the money that you have. So that's its great option. Get yourself 2 months of food, the ability to source water and heat. Try and, at least at this late time, it's very difficult for anybody to understand, but there might be relief from that anyway. But try and become as debt-free as one can. But then use gold as a way of looking for what comes in afterwards to buy back in to the system. But be assured that if you have to, you will be able to spend that gold at pre-crisis purchasing power, and that's its main its main value.
Yeah, they even have these little. They look a little bit like chocolate. 1 gram of gold attached to another,
Yeah.
and the same for silver. So let's say you are in a situation when nobody wants to have the paper money anymore under no circumstances. Then it's very practical to have these little pieces of gold.
Yeah. Another way of doing it, I knew a number of guys, actually all of them were German, funny enough, that I knew in Asia. They walked around with gold chains, and each link in that chain was, at the time they made the chain, was valued at $100. So if they needed a quick $100, they just simply would shorten their chain by 1 link and have it that way. And that was how they sort of got through the use of gold in terms of that. And like these guys were people who understood that there are times coming. Well, I mean, Germany's the case study in the Western civilization experience for hyperinflation. The Weimar Republic and so on. What happened to Germany at that time is, if anybody understands where paper money can end up, it would be the German population.
Yeah, but unfortunately, they have forgotten a lot of that. And a lot of people, the younger generations, they don't even know that they had bags.
Yes, wheelbarrows.
To
buy a loaf of bread.
Money to buy a bread or something. Yeah, but that is where it is headed. In terms of a timeline, I don't have a crystal ball, but and what I found particularly disturbing was how they handled the Credit Suisse case.
All right, yeah. Well, like the SVB case, the Silicon Valley Bank in the United States, it was all geared. They know that they can't respond the same way that the bank that they did back in the 2008 crisis. The American Secretary of the Treasury, a guy called Hank Paulson, just marched into Congress with writing on about two pages worth of analysis, and basically told them, if you don't pass the 750 billion, I think it was, amount we need, tanks on the street by tomorrow, and you've had it. I don't think they can quite push that one now and such, but what they're doing is they don't care about the average person and their deposits in there. They are making sure that the people that count within their deep state sort of connections, the people that are on the inside and so on, that their money is safe with regards the amount that they had in there. That's why they jumped in and said it's going to, no matter what the amount, we're going to secure those deposits. In America, it's 250,000. So you're an idiot if you put 250,000 in a bank and expect that you're going to get your money back afterwards. You'll get 250,000 in about 10 years' time. But you had people in there with 500 million, and some billionaires and so on. They've been made whole by what Janet Yellen has done and so on. And of course, the incredible thing is that some of these people are the Chinese Communist Party. And so on, Janet Yellen was left spluttering in front of Congress when that was actually pointed out to her, that there were foreign depositors whose money was being made whole. But it's the people like the Pelosi's and other people like that who have been told that their deposits, no matter what the amount, is going to be saved. And there's a similar thing going on with Credit Suisse. As far as the shareholders go, to hell with you. It's now the deposits that are the important thing, and but that just tells you that there is something systemic going on behind the scenes. I doubt we see even 20% of the panic that is happening behind the scenes. Janet Yellen last Friday, was it? I think it was last Friday. I might be wrong. No, it was last Friday. She called a meeting of all the bigwigs in the United States, and I'm sure that other people around the world were involved. I know Christine Lagarde was involved in that. And their press release after it was, everything's fine, no worries. We're going to sort of do what it takes, and sort of, that there were people sitting in on that meeting terrified of where this is all going to go and how quickly it could go. Hank Paulson once let the cat out the bag. It came to within 2 hours in 2008, total systemic lockup. It's when they bailed out AIG. Is it AIG? I think it was. That might be a German company I'm thinking of, but it was one of the insurance, AIG. I can't remember. It was either AIE or AIG Insurance. And they bailed them out, and by all accounts, it came to within 2 hours of total systemic lockup in terms of the financial system. We're going to approach those, I think, in the next month to 2 months, if not sooner. Especially now that the Americans can't bully everybody by being the reserve currency of the world. That's one of the weapons that is no longer part of the whole thing. And if the American central banking system fails, because of what the way they've responded to Russia and China, these guys have a system now that's independent of all that. I don't know what they call it, but the SWIFT banking system can no longer be used to bully these guys, and everybody can move towards that pretty quickly, as dislocating as it is. They can do that, and I think they know something is going down. I got to say, I heard, and it was pretty much confirmed that it happened. Janet Yellen, about a month ago, took a strange journey down to South Africa. Now, South Africa is one of the big players in what they call the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And of course, South Africa has always been the jewel box of the world. Its gold reserves, its diamond reserves, that kind of thing. And she supposedly went down there as Treasury Secretary to talk about South Africa's energy crisis. All right. She didn't meet with anybody from the energy sector. She didn't meet with politicians or whatever. Apparently, she met with people involved in the finance industry and the banking industry. She didn't take the United States Secretary of Energy for his expertise and insight on the supposed energy crisis problem. And the whole thing was kept silent. Nobody knew she was down there until she'd left and such, right? I think something happened down there in South Africa where it was a begging thing. Don't go with them. Stay with us. Don't leave us in our time of need, so to speak, or whatever. And I don't think it worked. No. I think the South Africans have decided, we've had a guts full of this, as far as that goes. I also think one of the most interesting things that's coming out is what's happening in the state of Israel at the moment. A lot of people have only just realized that some of the people who got their money out of SVB that started this whole aspect, the Israeli government had a team involved, telling everybody who was involved, because Israel is a high-tech country with a lot of what do you call it, software development companies and things like that banked with Silicon Valley Bank. They were given forewarning, a good 24 to 48 hours forewarning, get your money out now before anybody. And well, I don't blame them. I'd love it if I was in a bank in my country, gave me that advice and sort of broke with the banking establishment and so on to give me an upside if I was of that kind of wealth. But it's very interesting that happened, because they've all been trying to find the blame for the initial bank runs. And the amount of money that Israel pulled out has to be a factor in triggering this off. And now you've got this problems there where people are even talking about potential civil war. That I find one of the most incredible developments. I didn't pick that. I never figured that Israel would degenerate into a threat of civil war, based on its country. That's quite an amazing development.
Yeah. I know a lot of people thought that even back 2008, oh, this is not going to end well, but I have to say they have been very creative, kicking down the empty can,
Yes.
down the road further and further.
Yeah,
because nothing has changed.
Yeah.
The gambling casino went ahead, and we also have a derivatives bubble.
Yeah, Peter Schiff has said this crisis is simply the reemergence of the last crisis, and such. They can have all kinds of explanations for this and that, but when the collateral debt obligations, I think that's the term is for this insane thing that Warren Buffett calls weapons of mass financial destruction. This idea that you can take out insurance on a deal that has nothing to do with you. The way it was described to me, it's like everybody being able to take out insurance on everybody else's house. If you've got a neighborhood of 100 people, all right, that's, the maths escapes me at the moment in terms of that. But if one person took out insurance claims on every single house and everybody else did the same thing, it only takes one house to burn down. And that's what they've been pushing away down the line. And gold is your thermometer for where this might actually go. They keep trying to keep down gold. They rehypothecate it. I think there's 250 to 300. I could be wrong what the amount is, but for every ounce of gold that they keep in storage in the bullion banks, there's at least 250 pieces of paper claiming the ounce of gold. One person is going to get the ounce of gold if they decide they want it, and the other 249, if that's the number. Sorry, but that's a piece of paper that you have. And that's how they've kept gold down. And going back to your mention of crypto, if there's one thing that I look at crypto, this is going to sound crazy to many people, but Bitcoin is where gold would be if they weren't messing about with the price. Okay. They are now in a situation where they have to keep the crypto ball down, or they have to keep the gold ball down. By the ball, I mean the beach ball theory, that you can hold, the gold's price suppression is like a beach ball held under the water. You let go of it, it's going to pop, it's going to overshoot it and, hit the surface where it's at. But, there's a good indication, people have talked about gold going to 5,000. I know Sirius analysts who claim that it may overshoot to as much as 50,000 US dollars and so on. And this is where you get the idea that maybe Bitcoin is almost your proxy price for where gold should be in terms of purchasing power, as to how low the US dollar actually is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm, I cannot hold really Bitcoin, and I'm a type of person, if you don't hold it, you don't own it.
Agreed. Yeah.
And let's say when society collapses at large, then what is with the energy system? Yeah, how do I even access my Bitcoins? Those
Absolutely.
are my thoughts.
Yeah, they lay on that hard drive. You might have it on if you're that kind of a holder of it, and so on. Internet access becomes a problem. Yes, it's possibly a very good system for what comes after. Because it is a system, as far as I can work out, that you can tell if you're being ripped off. That will catch people out who do to it what the central banks have been doing to fiat money over the last 50 years. But yes, I couldn't agree with you more that, in terms of what the hierarchy of needs, air, water, food, shelter, and clothing, and so on, the old adage of 9/10 of the law being possession, if you don't hold it physically, you don't own it. I'm personally of a person who believes that real wealth is what the land produces, because everything comes from what the land produces, and really gold is just a currency, a means by which we can we can exchange what we really need. You can't live off gold if you're on a desert island. You need that water, food, and access to land. But again, and hoping to give people some sort of optimism for the future. The day is coming, I believe, when land speculation is going to be taken out of the equation. Either you use the land to produce something worthwhile, or it loses value. This idea, which is usually based on which usually is created as a result of the introduction of debt-based money, or money at usury and so on. This idea that you hold land as a speculative form of value up through make your money that way, that's got to go. And the ancient practice of Jubilee, the Persians had it, the Greeks to a certain extent, certainly the biblical nations practiced it in one form or another. And I believe even the Chinese and Japanese had versions of that, where you don't allow the holding of land to be a speculative investment. It's what you produce from the land. If you want to build a house from it and create a service-based business, fine. That's fine. That's what it is. But the speculation of the land under a Jubilee system is that it starts at a certain arbitrarily arrived at number. It lessens in price. In the biblical model, it's 40 years. In the Persian model, it's during the reign of every king. So if he rules for 5 years, it resets after 5. If he rules for 50 years, it resets after 50. But it stops that speculative sort of stuff that we have seen so much of finance capitalism degenerates into, rather than productive capitalism. It's become the speculative bane on society. There's really just a wealth transfer from those who are productive to those who have the inside tracked thanks to the money system.
Yeah. So let's shift gears.
I was just going to say though, because I had a couple of notes on that. Watch for what's going to happen to JP Morgan over the Epstein stuff. All right, have you heard of that and such? So we're waiting for May, but keep that on your radars, everybody out there. Also, just notice how sabotage is becoming a feature of American life, and I think also throughout the West, but particularly in America, it's showing this. The amount of train derailments, but also food processing plants, factories involved in food production, particularly poultry, that sort of thing, dairy, they're getting hammered. They seem to be blowing up all over the place. I think this was part of the original plan. All right, that they had originally, and we were supposed to be in a state of war. We were supposed to be in a state of lockdown for 10 years before any vaccines could, be gotten to us and so on. But they've gone ahead anyway with this level of sabotage. Not to mention America's sabotage of Nord Stream and such. Yes, I'm completely convinced that Seymour Hersh got it right. That the Americans. Well, just the Americans, but probably with the help of the Brits, the British actually sabotaged the Nord Stream line and so on like that. So now America is as far as I'm concerned, it is a nation, a terroristic nation. They are involved in that kind of sabotage. Look, also this absolute clown show that's going on in the American Congress, where they've got all these people coming through for very important jobs, whether it's in transportation and in the minerals of the country, the ministry, the department that deals with that, and so on. These people are being shown to have absolutely no knowledge of the subject they're supposed to be coming, into things. Now that is by design. All right, that's by design. Their job is to simply rubber stamp what the people further up want to do. But watch for that, and and watch also for China's China's belligerence towards Taiwan, and also China's involvement in the current fentanyl trade that is going into the United States. What that means with regards to the history between the United States, Great Britain versus China.
Yeah, thank you for that. And now, let's talk a little bit about the Ganymede hypothesis. My goodness. So, Ganymede, of course, is one of the moons of Jupiter.
Yeah.
And maybe you can take it from there. What the idea behind that hypothesis is.
Okay, so I developed the Ganymede hypothesis. Now, my co-author that I developed with is a guy called Ted Holden. He's rather infamous on the internet as a troll for various sort of pseudoscience people would call discussions on the internet and so on. But he contacted me once and said, look, we've got a problem with the old Saturn theory idea, which is the basis of my book, Saturn Death Cult, where I present a cosmology for people who that sort of explains a different origin to the solar system to the one that is taught in most university schools and so on, i.e. that the solar system is actually quite young in its current configuration, and that it's actually a collection of captured planetary bodies, of which Saturn, Earth, and Mars and Venus are the latest arrivals within the time of human existence. And I say that because in Saturn theory, in a nutshell, Earth was originally a satellite of a brown dwarf star that would later become the planet Saturn. And with Earth in tow, Saturn was captured by the sun. The planetary system of Saturn with Earth and Mars was disrupted and rearranged into the current configuration. And the most preposterous part for many people of this whole theory, if that's not bad enough, is that this happened during the memory of humankind and is the basis of much of the mythological record that we have today. And so on. So that cosmology challenges the idea that the solar system has been as it is, at least for the last 4 billion years. And with the planets forming where they are today, largely, and so on. And it challenges it by making the assumption that in fact our solar system is a collection of captured disparate bodies, very different types of planets and that make up the current system that we have at the moment. My future passed now, but the person who contacted me, Ted Holden, said, your idea that Earth, when it was under Saturn's, when it was in orbit with the planet Saturn as a brown dwarf star, it had what was called, we call it the purple dawn of creation environment, where you had this uniformitarian purple duskiness that makes a very difficult to tell the passage of time environment, because everything is uniform. There's no day, there's no night. The light that bathes the entire planet is a kind of it's a combination of red and blue from a brown dwarf star. It provides a sort of a purple duskiness to the entire planet, which is great for plants. It's great for the whole ecosystem at that time, in that Earth enjoyed a kind of permanent harvest environment, under these conditions where trees grew and so on. You didn't need to plan ahead. You didn't need to farm anything to make sure you had the food. It was always on the go. But it was a world in which people could not tell time. If you fell asleep, when you woke, you did not know if you'd slept 5 minutes or 5 days. You couldn't make plans with people. I'll see you next Tuesday. There was no such thing as the day, according to this theory, and so on. Ted suggested that human beings, as we know them, are completely, non-adapted to this kind of environment. We are a bright world species. We tend, our main sense is our sight. Virtually all animals, and in Saturn theory, there's a lot to show that virtually all mammals that are extant today, and certainly in the past, were nocturnal by nature. So the purple dawn environment was, the cat that I can see and so on would thrive in a purple dawn environment. That's, perfect for them. Most animals have in some way a fantastic adaptation for that kind of duskiness that you get. I would say 90% of creatures are sort of born that way, whether it's favoring their hearing, favoring their sense of smell, even the sense of touch and so on like that. Eyesight often is their least important form of sort of sense, apart from predators like eagles and things like that. All right, but to cut a long story short, Ted was challenging me on the basis that how can humans have evolved, for want of a better term, or if you are of a religious nature, have been created by a god who would put them into a situation that was very, very detrimental to their survival, as such, and so he argued that this idea that the human species is alien to the Earth, and so we got discussing, because I'm always open to people coming up with ideas like that. I didn't at that time have a very good response to them. I do now, and I have pulled back from that. I think humans actually do show signs of very good adaptation to a purple dawn environment, which we can discuss later if people, find that of interest. So I've pulled away from Ted's idea, but at the time I thought this is interesting. Let's have a look at this. And since we were working on the basis that Saturn theory was our base model, our base hypothesis, that Saturn would be captured at a later date in human history, very recent in terms of the human experience, into a world where it become a bright world, illuminated by at first two suns and then the sun itself, as we know it. Where could the human population have actually come from? Is there anywhere else that isn't light years away in another constellation or something like that? Is there anywhere else that could have supported human life? And this is where Ted and I were different. We looked at the problem, and I decided that the best solution for this was that we had to look for yet another we had to look for yet another planetary system based on a brown dwarf that would have actually been able to support a terrestrial satellite, a rocky moon, a rocky planet, that would have been conducive to life as we know it, that could have supported life as we know it. And taking Wal Thornhill, one of the great electric universe theorists who passed recently, I'm sad to say, but certainly a huge influence on my own understanding. So brown dwarfs have always been what he calls the cocoon for potential life in the universe. And, he always argued that's where you go looking for alien life if you want to find it. Find sub-brown dwarfs, of which there are probably 7,000 of them between us and the next nearest main sequence star. But find sub-brown dwarfs, look into them using infrared technology, radio wave technology, and so on, because that's inside the cocoons that they create around them, in the sort of atmospheric cocoons. Inside are these terrestrial planets that could actually be harboring life, or certainly the life as we knew it. And it occurred to me that the planet Jupiter could have actually been exactly that kind of a sub-brown dwarf that was, for a time, in a binary relationship with the sun, but that the four major moons, Europa, Callisto, for some reason,
Io.
Io, and of course Ganymede, were candidates. If it had been this kind of sub-brown dwarf, they were candidates for possibly a moon that could have supported life as we know it. Now, just bear in mind here that we're searching for Ted's idea that humans might have come from another planetary body and been transplanted onto Earth. And I'll just say that I've moved away myself from that. I don't discount it, and so on, but I don't discount that there are human beings of different strains, all compatible with each other, that could have arisen on both, if you know what I mean. But my argument at the moment just simply is that Ganymede is a place where life could have existed, not did exist, until they dig up a skeleton and so on like that on the ice of Ganymede. I'm not going to sort of go for that, but taking that paradigm of sub-brown dwarf stars being cocooned, so to speak, for life, the generation of life on life-supporting terrestrial bodies, Ganymede seemed the perfect example, simply because Ganymede is the only other body, terrestrial body, that has what's called an intrinsic. My mind is sort of gone. What is it called? The sphere, the magnetosphere. It has an intrinsic magnetosphere rather than an induced magnetosphere, which is something you need if you want to protect a planet's surface from radiation. And Jupiter gives off enormous radiation, which all brown dwarf stars do. So you need protection from that radiation. And the best forms of protection are an intrinsic magnetosphere and a water-based atmosphere. All right. And the ice moons, as they're called, of Jupiter are awash in water, particularly Ganymede. Ganymede has more water on it than the Earth has water on it at this time. It also shows that it had an oxygen atmosphere at one point. It's the only other body that we have visited in the solar system that has traces of oxygen. It's an exosphere, so it's very, very small, but it does show that it had this oxygen. And so my understanding was that if you can imagine a solar system before the arrival of Saturn with Mars and Earth in tow, and the birth of Venus as a result of that capture, so you're minus 4 major planets at this time before the arrival of Saturn, then you could imagine a solar system where the outer gas giants are where they were, but Jupiter is much closer in, with Mercury, currently where it is at the moment, but Jupiter much closer in, acting as a brown dwarf star in a binary relationship with the sun. And suddenly you can actually see Ganymede, not the other three planets, but particularly Ganymede, as a potential warm water planet, especially if it had a chance to develop a dense enough oxygen-based atmosphere. And as a result of that, a place where you can theorize it could have supported life as we know it, even up to human life, if you've got all the other aspects to it. My co-author went boots and all and said, we've done it. We've discovered the birthplace of humanity. No, I am not of that thinking as such as it goes. But if I were looking for life as we know it somewhere else in the solar system, my money would be on Ganymede, which, as a result of the capture of Saturn, Jupiter and Saturn basically canceled each other out, pushed each other out into the outer realms of the solar system where we see it. Earth was ripped, and Mars was ripped from its relationship with Saturn to find itself where it is, and the moons of Jupiter froze over, and whatever life was there will be lost in that water that they have there. Some factors about Ganymede that are very interesting. Its ice is fresh water. It's lacking in salt in the way of other oceans and so on. So it would have been a freshwater world as it was. It has the largest dust cloud of any body in the solar system surrounding it, which points to what I would call basically how would I term this? It's like as if it had been fried at some point and burnt due to electrical activity, the plasma going into arc mode in terms of its connection with Jupiter. And of course, we know that Jupiter as a planet became the god Jupiter, is known for the thunderbolt, the electrical thunderbolt, and so on like that. So if there had been life on Ganymede, it would have been obliterated pretty much the same way as if there had been on life on Mars. Mars got obliterated during the capture of Saturn as such. But so this is my stance with regards to a prequel to what was happening in our solar system before the capture of Saturn, which brought Earth along with it, that Ganymede may have once been a warm water planet with Jupiter when Jupiter was much closer to the sun in its orbit. But this all got terribly disrupted with the arrival of Saturn.
Okay, so now let me try to recapture this if I have understood correctly. There was a time when Jupiter was in a binary relationship with our sun, meaning there was no Mars, Venus, Mercury, Earth.
It was Mercury.
Mercury was
Mercury. The only other terrestrial planet in orbit around the sun, terrestrial planet.
Yeah. Okay. But other than Mercury, there was the Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter and its moons. Yes,
and possibly Uranus and Neptune, but where they are pretty much as it is. There's still a lot of theorizing to do with Uranus as far as its arrival and what happened there. It may have preceded Saturn, but yes, essentially the inner solar system, all right, which today is Saturn inwards. And so on. The inner solar system was Mercury, followed by Jupiter, acting as its own solar system with its moons, while orbiting the sun at a much closer, probably where we are today, where Earth is today, was where Jupiter had once been.
Okay, and who and what was the brown dwarf? Jupiter?
Jupiter was a brown dwarf. You're testing my memory here. It was a different type of brown dwarf to Saturn. There are many classes of brown dwarf: L, M, T, brown dwarfs, that kind of thing. All brown dwarfs have as a characteristic, they are copious water carriers. So whatever their atmosphere is, because brown dwarfs are not terrestrial planets, they're not made of rock, silicate, that kind of thing. They have their core with their atmosphere around the core, but they also have this greater, what in electric universe terms we call a plasma sheath. And water can mist within that cocoon, so to speak. So terrestrial planets or terrestrial moons is what you would call them, orbiting such a brown dwarf star, whichever class of brown dwarf star it was. Aside from getting warmed, they're also getting this water vapor misting down onto them to collect water as it is. And if they get themselves an atmosphere, which is perfectly possible because effectively they act as an anode to a cathode in terms of their relationship with the core brown dwarf, the moon, you get what's called electrolysis, which is where water, it breaks down into its constituency of hydrogen and oxygen. All right. So if you're getting that electrical relationship taking place, you're having electrolysis take that misted water and break it up into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is more attracted back to the core, the anode of the relationship, which is the brown dwarf star itself. The oxygen sticks to the anode, which is the planet. So you start building up an atmosphere through the breakdown by electrolysis of water. So you're getting all what you need to begin with in terms of creating a body that can support life. You are getting water and you are getting oxygen. And all you need at that point is a moon that also has a decent magnetosphere, and you've got the ingredients to start on your way to Earth-like conditions.
So then Jupiter had, let's say, characteristics of a minor star.
Most definitely. Sub-brown dwarf stars are not stars. The mainstream definition of them is that they haven't collapsed enough to become a star like our main sequence star, the sun, and so on. And so they only ever glow, if you know what I mean. They don't actually sort of burn nuclear. Electric universe model discards this. All stars are a electrostatic phenomenon in the universe that is linked into Hannes Alfvén's galactic electric circuit. They're driven by electricity, and they're connected by Birkeland currents, as we call them, discovered by Christian Birkeland, and so on. They are made up of plasma, the most conductive substance known in the universe. And so really a brown dwarf star and the main sequence star and other stars are just fluctuations in what effectively is a short circuit in the galactic model to create a spark, the light that comes with that. We call those short circuits plasma pinchers, which everything can be demonstrated in a laboratory to show how this actually works towards the creation of sun-like objects. But a brown dwarf star is, rather than it hasn't compressed enough through gravity to become ignited as a nuclear ball, we just see it as a low level, a dim bulb compared to a main sequence star and such, but nonetheless still capable of generating the environment to create a planetary system of moons, terrestrial moons, that sort of thing. And in fact, there is a thinking in the electric universe idea that all planets, and particularly any planets, as I said just earlier on, that have the ability to support life as we know it, would start around a brown dwarf star, and that these brown dwarf stars ultimately can be captured by main sequence stars. And that's exactly what we argue for the formation of our current solar system as we see it, which is actually incredibly unique. There is hardly, I don't think they found anything remotely like our solar system anywhere else in the galaxy. We're discovering exoplanets, thousands of them now and such like that. But we have never found a planetary, a solar system, even remotely like the one that we have now. We have a salad bowl planetary system, solar system. Most planets are either terrestrial, most solar systems are either terrestrial or gas giant type configurations. And where we do see both types it's that model where the terrestrial bodies are actually circling the hot Jupiters, as they call them, rather than circling the main sequence star.
Mm-hmm. So we are the odd kid on the block.
Very much so. Very much so. It's, which has always been a problem with the uniformitarian idea that if they've got with a circumstellar disk and the what's called the disk accretion theory and so on, it has always been so weird that if disk accretion theory is correct, why is Jupiter so different to Saturn, which is so different to Neptune, so different to Uranus? Why are the terrestrial planets so different if we all come from the same circumstellar disk of dust and so on? Why are the axial tilts so different? If that's how it has worked along the line, and increasingly mainstream science has evoked what Immanuel Velikovsky was absolutely ostracized and criticized for back in the 1950s, when he said that collisions between celestial bodies are the norm, not the odd thing. So now they're invoking all kinds of things that, Uranus was knocked on its side, and these sorts of things happen all the time, and we've seen it. Jupiter was hit by some major cometary collisions just before the turn of the century. But the issue is that it makes no sense in a circumstellar disk, which is made pretty much uniform particles and gases, why these planets are so incredibly different in their physical makeup, let alone their axial tilts. And so the idea that the solar system was formed through a process of capture, in my opinion, makes a lot more sense than the idea that it was spun out of a circumstellar disk.
Mm-hmm. And these days we see the Jupiter as a gas giant. So
Yeah.
when did that happen approximately?
Well, if I take you back to, because Saturn is also a gas giant now. So Saturn, I believe, is probably a third or maybe a half of the volume that it was when I say it used to shine like a sun in Earth's celestial north, okay, during the capture process and so on. It was a lot bigger. But when you get a brown dwarf star captured by a main sequence star, in the electric universe model, what you're seeing is two different electric fields coming into contact. One will be dominated by the more powerful electrical field, and as a result, it will short circuit. And this is the basis behind, we've often discussed in the past, Judith, we've talked about the let there be light moment on Earth, when everything changed for humanity, and they went from that purple dawn existence to suddenly this brightness in the sky that basically also led to them being able to calculate the passage of time and so on. All these massive changes that took place on Earth, we in Saturn theory say is a result of Saturn short-circuiting, all right, as a brown dwarf star, in coming into contact with with the sun's far more powerful electrical field. So in short-circuiting, it blows up, it goes nova-like, and flashes out, but it also loses a lot of its mass, a lot of its ability, and of course, not ability, a lot of its mass and material. And of course, this is, again, in the theory, this is where we say the rings of Saturn, which are water, ice water. The rings of Saturn are a result of that expulsion of all the water that we had. So on. There was also in mythology, the chaos monster, the great dragon, whichever, Quetzalcoatl or whatever from the Aztecs and so on, that circled the face of Saturn like a enveloping snake and cloud and so on. This was all the debris of the actual physical stuff in the core of Saturn. It also spat out a huge part of its core, because in fissioning, the core, which is magnetically charged, would have overloaded and could have fractured. And as a result, the fractured smaller piece would have been ejected, in the same way that two magnets, if you bring them together with the same polarization, they reject each other. So the idea of a chunk of the core of Saturn being ejected by Saturn and becoming the future planet Venus, as it finds its place, below Saturn in the configuration of planets that mythology tells us that we see at that time. All these talk about a major event, and at the same time, people start to notice this dull but growing star in the east that would spin, would sort of disappear, come back, and so on, like we know, and it would grow larger as the golden age of Saturn was established, and it moved on. You've also got to remember that for the people of Earth, they lost that cocoon that I've been talking about with all these things. So they were exposed to the greater cosmos, all the stars, everything like that. But in exploding like that, monumental event in the experience of humans on planet under Saturn and the change that took place, it was also the death of Saturn. It would be a slow death, but it was the death of Saturn as an actual star, because its electric field was now equalizing with the sun's electric field. That's what happens when you bring in two electrical fields. The less powerful electric field will equalize through short circuiting with the more powerful electric field. Okay, so that's what was happening to Saturn, and eventually that explosive nature that turned it into this wonderful sun, the first great sun that the alchemists talk about and so on, that they called the god Saturn, ultimately in the mythologies. That was the beginning of its end, and it would become a sickly planet that would eventually be knocked off from its position in the celestial north, and is now a mere pinprick of reflected light out on the outer skirts of the solar system as we know it. Now, if that was happening to Saturn, it was also happening to Jupiter. Even if Jupiter was this even bigger brown dwarf star, I don't know what size, it too would have undergone a short circuiting in its current shape at the time, its current makeup of the time. And most of us in Saturn theory, this is why Jupiter, who is a late coming god, if you remember, Jupiter kills his father in the mythologies and so on, but he's always associated with the great thunderbolt. All right. And my understanding is that while humans were witnessing the Saturn as the most prominent celestial object in its northern skies, with Mars and Venus dangling below it, and and this growing sun that was coming up and casting a different light on the Earth and so on, they would also have seen the after effects of whatever short circuiting Jupiter had gone through. So they would have seen all of the electrical arcing activity that would have happened, and hence that particular planetary to become a god's reputation for chucking thunderbolts around. All right, this is why Jupiter, Zeus, he's got that funny looking fork lightning thunderbolt sort of weapon that he's always portrayed with. It a lot of people in mainstream mythology have have a difficulty understanding what it actually is. Is it a club? Is it a sword? Whatever along those lines. But it actually is for people who study plasma physics, it's plasma energy in the hand of that god, and that's what they saw. Ultimately, that planet would be the reason that Saturn would be knocked out from its position, and Earth would be ripped from its relationship with Saturn into the current orbit that it has now. But Jupiter itself would also be pushed out because of all these changes that took place to the position that it's in at the moment. And it would also lose its star-like quality in the sense of being able to glow. So if this theory has any merit, then essentially you would expect to find star-like qualities on the part of Jupiter and Saturn that are not there on other planets and other gas planets, gas giants. And this is what Velikovsky argued for when he accurately predicted that Jupiter would emit X-ray, radio waves, X-rays and so on, and that Saturn also would have emissions of X-rays and so on like that. These being, how can I put it, the ashes of something that used to glow like a star, a brown dwarf star. As such, this is what you would expect to find, these traits. It is a fact that Saturn gives off more energy than it receives from the sun. Again, completely and utterly against any concept conceived in the accretion disk theory of planetary formation and such. Saturn, crackles with electrical energy. Its auras, aurora, the phenomena that it has at its poles. It's warmer at its poles than it is at its equator, which is bizarre because at least one of those poles spends something like 13 years in utter darkness, and yet it emits warmth. But if it was originally a brown dwarf star that controlled its own system of planets with an electrical current that, if you can imagine it, coming out of its poles, circling back round to connect with its moons and so on like that, that's energy, that's electrical energy that is feeding into what once used to be a brown dwarf star. So it makes perfect sense that Saturn would have warmer poles than it would have at its equator. Simply because it's the last vestiges of what once used to be a brown dwarf star. Same with Jupiter.
Okay. So, Troy, that was already the first hour. It went by very, very fast. So, yeah. And we will see the patrons on the other side. Bye-bye.
Sure. And of course, I mean,